Welcome to the Speaking Podcast. You can find all our episodes on speakingpodcast.com. We're also on BitChute and YouTube as Speaking Podcast. I also have the Awakening Podcast, the Learn Polish Podcast, and the Meditation Podcast, and all can be found on roycollin.com. Today, my guest from Rhode Island, please welcome Peter George.
Hi, Roy. Pleasure to be here.
So, as you probably know at this stage, I always like to people to introduce themselves rather than me reading a script.
Yeah, well, I'll try to keep it brief, but the reason I'm a public speaker and public speaking coach primarily now is when I was a kid, I grew up with a Lisp and a stutter. And when you grew up in the city with a Lisp and a stutter and you're 9 years old, you learn to do two things very well. One is keep your mouth shut, and the other is to become very proficient in sports, because if you were good in sports, you didn't get picked on. But I grew up very shy and introverted because of all this and did not want to communicate with people in the least. Just didn't want to talk school or anywhere else. However, when I got to the corporate world, I realized I had to talk to people. And I went and got help to become a better presenter in the corporate world. And then when I left the corporate world and went out on my own, to be a better presenter, to represent my own company. That led to me speaking on stage for more than 30 years now, and for 17 of those years, helping others be calm, confident, and credible every time they get up in front of other people to talk.
Excellent, excellent. And I know that you're actually helping attorneys, which I found strange, but I mean, I have come across actually attorneys that weren't competent speakers. So it's interesting, but I'm wondering how you got into that field of, that being a kind of select client for you.
Well, that's one of them. It's executives, professional speakers, and attorneys. And attorneys weren't really one of my target audiences, but they were an audience that came to me. And from around the world, actually, I just got a call the other day from an attorney in the Netherlands to work with me. 2 days before that, an attorney in Washington, D.C., as well as here local in New England. So they came to me, and it's funny because one of the first things they ask is, will you sign a non-disclosure agreement? Because they're very funny. I don't know why, but they don't want people to know they're getting help in this way. But many attorneys I'm finding, as much as the bravado they put forward, and they have that JD diploma hanging up behind their heads in their office, they have either imposter syndrome or they're just not as confident as we believe they are. And one of the things about becoming a better presenter, whether they're in court or otherwise, is becoming more confident. And that's what I believe most of my clients get, is a level of confidence that they didn't even know they were capable of having.
Like what's interesting for me is because I'm only joined Toastmasters about 4 years ago, and prior to that basically was terrified of public speaking. I've had a load of court cases, just through various businesses that I've had, and I used to be terrified, just nervous, and when you have to speak and everything. And now it doesn't frazzle me at all, but I could see a huge market for the actual people that are in court, because especially when someone is innocent, the guilty, confident person has a better chance of winning over the innocent, shy, nervous person.
I've sat in courts where I've looked at the defense attorney and I'm thinking, that's one of the last people in the world I would want defending me, because their lack of confidence or their lack of engagement with their audience, which happens to be either the judge or the jury, the lack of engagement, it's just not working. And you can see it on the jury's face. Now, theoretically, should that change a just outcome? No. Does it in reality? I'm sure it does in some occasions, if not many.
Yeah. The other thing is, I think, because sometimes there's people that are getting to do TEDx speeches, but you're actually you've been a coach for 2 TEDx events.
Yes.
So that's very interesting for me. So one, like, I presume you just take a speaker, or are you taking all of the speakers through the whole process from when they get appointed to when they step off that red dot?
In the TEDx instances, it's really those in that group that want to work with me, because there are some who just don't. I'm perfectly good and I'm good to go, and that's that. Others will step up right away. I get introduced to them as soon as they're selected. And some will say, great, when can we get this on our calendar? I want to work on the formation of the presentation. I want to work on body language, whatever it may be. And then there's those in the middle who will call me a week before the event and say, can we start working together? We could, but it's probably going to do more harm than good at this point. You just won't get enough of it. So there's all of that. But that's a very exciting opportunity for me, is to work with those speakers, because it is a very short amount of time to work with numerous speakers and to help them get where they want to go for that very short time that they're going to be on stage.
And like, how many times typically do you, when you're working with somebody, would you get them to actually practice the speech that they're going to perform?
To actually practice. All right, that's a different story. To actually practice, the ones who come to me right away will put in the time, for the most part. Some will say, wow, I didn't realize it was this involved. But you're going to get up in front of people not only that day or evening, you're going to be on video that others around the world can see. Don't you want to be good at this? Don't you want to have this down so you can get up there and be you and connect with those people? And that takes practice. A lot of people, they're still into, I know what I'm talking about. I have the guts to get up there. I'm good. Okay. I always say, in the right situations, when I kid around with people when they say that, is the Japanese have a word for when you have the guts to get up in front of people and you know what you want to say. You know the words. Do you know what that word is? It's karaoke. And how good is karaoke? Unless your audience has had 3 beers and a shot, you're probably not all that good. So just having the guts to get up in front of people and knowing what you want to say is not necessarily communicating with people. There's a huge cavern between those two things. And what I help people do is bridge that cavern.
I don't think people realize some people's careers have been changed based on a TEDx because it just blew up when it went online. It got millions of views. So they're it's worth them putting the effort in.
Yeah, it's well worth it. It's well worth it. I believe anytime you get up in front of people, you have to put the time in out of respect for them, if not for yourself. Because they're taking the time, whether they're going to be there to listen to you in person, whether they're going to take the time to watch you on video, they're investing time, which is valuable. And if you don't have enough respect to prep in respect for their time, then you're disrespecting not only them, but yourself.
So I know that you've spoken, I think it's in 7 different countries, and
yes,
probably most of the states in the country that you're in. So maybe first in America, is there a difference to how you would actually connect with the audience, and then international, the different countries that you've spoke at?
The difference is, well, I've spoken in the 48 contiguous states of the US. The only 2 I haven't spoken in are Alaska and Hawaii. And I'd like to speak in those someday. But in the US, it used to be 30 years ago that I would try to get rid of my Rhode Island accent. I'd try to pronounce my R's, which we just don't do. Like my name here in Rhode Island and New England is Peter. It's not Peter, it's Peter. So I would try to pronounce my R's, which would really screw it up more than anything else. But when I went to other countries, like say if I went to England, one of the things I would do with the host who was bringing me over there is I would ask for things I can say and cannot say. And it might just be some idioms that mean one thing here in the US and another thing in England or wherever I might be going. And I wanted to be sure not to use that language or those words because it would get a different meaning, if not an absolutely wrong meaning. across. So that's most of the prep I did, but any prep I do is based on the audience, that actual audience, which I suggest to everybody, because you have to know who you're talking to before you can decide what to say, whether it's in a short conversation or a presentation.
And have you done any keynotes or emceeing?
I've done both. Not so much anymore. I stopped speaking as much as I used to. I used to be on the road for an average of 158 hotel nights.
Ouch.
A year. And that was a lot. And it certainly wasn't like a rock group being on the road and every night, but every once in a while I'd wake up and wonder where I was. Am I in LA now, or do I have to get up and fly to LA today? Whatever it might be. And so that's changed. And actually, I forgot where I was going with it. What was your question again? I went off on wondering where I am.
No, just about emceeing and
MC,
and keynoting. Yeah.
Yeah, and I used to do keynotes, but like I said, after I traveled that much, I kind of hung up my speaking. I still will. And with today, with the pandemic and everybody turning to Zoom, I've done more speaking than I thought I would be again. But I concentrate mostly on coaching and helping others. But yeah, I emceed a number of events, as well as became a guest auctioneer in many events. And that was just through happenstance as well. That started with an auctioneer not showing up at an event one night in Chicago. And so since I was emceeing it, they asked me if I'd be the auctioneer. And I thought, I do not know how to do this. And I had an absolute blast, and we raised a lot of money. And I've done it many times since then. So in various ways, I've been up on stage in front of people, a lot of the time doing things I never thought I'd do.
Good. And like you mentioned, this funny times that we live in now, and you're online. So what have you learned that you can maybe give some people some tips from being? I mean, obviously you've got a very nice setup there, background color, so you have it done right. But like, what have you learned? What do you deal with audiences, or just one-on-one with the Zoom? With
both.
Both. Okay.
Not too long ago, less than a month ago, I spoke at an event that was based in Asia, so in Malaysia, and that had, I believe, 700 people or so. So for, whether it's one-on-one, whether it's training, whether it's speaking, this has opened up the world, which is fantastic. When you said what's a tip or an idea, what I've learned, one of the things I learned before I ended up putting a teleprompter up and being able to look at you right through to the camera was to sit and stare at that little light on my laptop. And if you have a MacBook, then it's a little green light. And I would stare at that little green light no matter what was happening on the screen, because I knew that was how I was making eye contact. And that was a learned process. It took a while to do that, as opposed to looking down. And that's one of the mistakes we're making as people on video, is we'll generally look down instead of looking at the camera. And it's reasonable to understand why. I was told, I don't know how true this is, but I was told that Apple is actually working on a virtual reality where it will take a recording of your eyes when you look at the camera. And so now if you look down at the screen, it will superimpose your eyes looking up. I don't know if that's true. I don't know if it'll work. I just think it would look freaky as could be, to tell you the truth. But that's how much this seems to be a problem. And it's learning to look into the camera as opposed to the screen.
What I started doing, because I haven't got into the habit of looking at the camera. I am now, but I'm looking at you. I've squashed in the screen, and then so you're on top, and then I'm looking at, so that I'm engaging and just seeing reactions and stuff like that. So it's just the way. But it'll be interesting if Apple do come out like that, because if you look down and you see eyes appearing on the top of somebody's head, you'll be like, "Ooh, is this guy an alien or something like that?"
I just don't know how it would work. Even if you tilted your head down a little, and if the eyes were open looking up, I just don't know how it would work. So, but again, it shows that the fact that we're not making eye contact is on people's minds.
Yeah.
And just like person to person, just like your mother told you, you have to look at people when you're speaking to them.
Exactly.
You have to look them in the eye. That doesn't change.
So when you were in physical audiences instead of the virtual world, connecting with the audience, what's your tricks for that one?
I train my clients that as soon as they walk out, that they have a little smile on their face, if it's appropriate. If they're going to give a eulogy, depending on what it is, you may or may not want to have a smile.
Unless
My
they're so
eulogy
happy that he died.
My eulogy for my mom was actually fairly funny because that was our relationship, and she died at an older age, so that was fine. But I teach my clients to have a little smile on their face, but when they get out there, to take 4 beats, to not start speaking right away. And that establishes themselves. Stand up straight, feet shoulder or hip width apart, 4 beats, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then open their mouths. And there's all different ways to start a presentation, as you know, but one of my favorites for myself, and I suggest to a lot of people, is with a question, because questions are engaging. And if you ask a question, rhetorical or otherwise, and you give people time to answer it, then you have them. You might lose them right afterwards, but at least you had them. If everything else goes well, you will get their attention right at the beginning. You'll separate yourself from other speakers that they've seen, and you can keep their attention. And that's what I use generally. Like I said, I generally use them. Sometimes I'll go other ways with a startling statistic or something else, but it's usually that question that just grabs people. I don't know how politically correct this is, and I'm not the most politically correct person out there, but when I was a kid, cartoons, Bugs Bunny, Daffy Duck, and things like that, someone would grab Daffy Duck by the throat, and his throat would elongate, and his eyes would pop up out of his head and all that. And then after, they'd let him go, and everything would come back to normal. And that's what I want my clients to do. That's what I want to do when I go out on stage, is to grab my audience, metaphorically, by the throat, get their attention, and when I'm done, place them back in their seat. And a question helps you do that.
No, very good, very good. I know that you've got a free ebook on your website, and I downloaded it and read it, and it's something that I didn't do, but I was intrigued because you have like 50 points or something like that. And one was that when you record the speech, first just listen, because I have done it. I've recorded, I think I've recorded every single speech. Well, in the later ones, no, but from the first 50 or first 100 I did. And I would look at it, but I never did what you said. And I think it's actually fantastic information that, first of all, don't look at it and just listen. And like, is that practice that you've done yourself? Because you can tell about that. I think it's brilliant.
All the time. And when you record yourself, we have the greatest tool ever for a public speaker to judge themselves, our phones. Greatest tool ever invented, video in general. We used to have to do that thing, look in the mirror, which really probably hurt more than it helped, because you can't. Did I just go black?
Yeah, I saw the timing. There was a clock on the side, and I was curious, what's that about? And I was counting down.
Hold on one sec.
Yeah, no problem.
That should not have happened.
There's no worries.
There we go. Sorry about that.
That's so we're on about.
You used to look in the mirror, and the mirror, you can't concentrate on what you're saying and critique yourself at the same time. Your brain can't split like that. So you're really not helping yourself a great deal. But when you video and you look at the video or use the video in 3 different ways, that helps a great deal. The first one, as you mentioned, just listen to it. Turn it upside down so you can't see it, and just listen to it. Are you pausing? Do you have a lot of fillers? Is your inflection in use, or are you monotone? What's happening with your voice? Then play it back with the sound off. So now you can watch your body language. Is your body language without sound agreeing and fostering what you're trying to say? Or is it betraying it? I tell a lot of people, quite often your body language talks behind your back and says bad things. And then just play it back with audio and video, but each time making notes about things you want to work on, things you want to correct right away if necessary. And that, I believe, is one of the greatest tools to help us become more effective speakers, more engaging speakers more quickly.
No, I think it's fantastic. It's something I wish I had known earlier. I think it's like, I mean, I think I've put up something like 84 episodes, and I've interviewed, I've in reserve. There's probably, so I probably have 100 done at this stage, and that's not something that I have heard. And that's the beauty of it. And where I'm going with this is, you're actually you have a podcast as well, a speaking podcast, and like, you've probably noticed that as well, just by talking to people. Every single person is bringing something different to the table.
I just recorded a podcast the other day that'll be out in a few weeks. And when the host was talking about something, I'm like, wow, I never heard it put that way. And then a little while later, I said something and he said, wow, I've never heard it put that way. And so, yeah, we learn from each other as we discuss this. You can't learn it in a vacuum. And I'm sure I wasn't the original person with the idea of using the 3 different ways to listen to or play back your video. I'm sure I heard it or read it somewhere along the line. And what greater thing than to be able to take ideas from other people who are sharing their ideas, and take those ideas and either build upon them or just share them as they are with yet other people. And that's what communication is all about, as far as I'm concerned.
Absolutely. Exactly. No,
Yeah, none of us own any of this.
No, and I mean, like, that's the aim. I mean, it's the same for yourself. Like, we're there to try to help people, because, like, personally, I believe that if we want to make change in the world, you need to become a better speaker, because there's a lot of people that they have the fight in them, but they just can't get the message out. And simple things like that message there, now what you said, that could be the difference between somebody getting it. Because, like, when I've seen competitions, it's the people that are using the body. I mean, there's some people, like, some competitions, they're over rehearsed, and you can see that there's like the acting, but there's others, they really do it well. And that's because they know exactly what type of movement they will do when they say a certain thing. And I think it gives you're on a different level when you're doing that.
That's one of my favorite parts. And I know I geek out on this. It's one of the few things that I geek out on in my life. But when I develop a presentation and I review it, I sit there and say, if I take this word, which is perfectly fine as it is, but I change it for a word that means the same thing, with that new word I select, I can do this with my body. And that's going to make a difference, because now it's not just the word, but it's my body movement as well, sending the same message. Where before, you might not be able to use the other word, you might not be able to use your body, or wouldn't use your body in a certain way. So I look for those words and say, what will this let me do? Will this be the word that lets me transition from this point on the stage to another point on the stage and get there and stay there for a while? Or do I have to change that word so I can do it? If I'm going to do it during my transition, what word do I want to use in that transition that goes along with me moving? Just subtle differences, but now I know I can use different parts of my presentation, voice, movement, body language, all to get a point across to my audience.
Excellent. Love it. Love it. And workshops, you've done some workshops in your, have you?
I love workshops. I'm probably more of a trainer and teacher than anything else. And I, as much as I love working with people one-on-one, which is probably my favorite thing, working in workshops or groups is a lot of fun too, because you get to affect a lot of people at the same time. Now, do they get the individualized help that one-on-one does? No, but workshops bring people together and they foster ideas between themselves as well. And one of the greatest things I see, especially when I work on workshops to do with the fear of public speaking, is people will start admitting things to themselves that they may not have before, or may not have admitted to anyone else before. I'll give you an example. Right before COVID hit, I did a workshop on fear of public speaking. And I just happened to mention at the beginning that some people actually leave their industry or say no to a promotion just because they know they'll have to present more if they stay in the industry or take that promotion. And someone said, people actually do that. And one young woman just shyly raised her hand and said, I've done that twice. And then a gentleman who's much older actually said, I've done that throughout my career. And I love seeing when they start interacting, because now I'm just facilitating. I'll get across what they need to know and what they came for. But when I can see them interact, that's a part of helping each other that they wouldn't get otherwise. And that's one of my favorite parts of group training or workshops.
Brilliant. And I think the joy as well of when you see somebody going from fear to, you know, where they become confident. There's nothing nicer. I mean, I've done it just through mentorship, through being a mentor on Toastmasters, and I've just seen people, you know, quivering, going up and then, you know, within 6 months, 3 months or a year, they're like totally confident and getting high up in competitions. It's a fantastic feeling to see that.
I think you just nailed it, Roy, with confidence. It's that confidence you get out of public speaking. And that's what I love about helping people. And I'll give you an example. I worked with the president of a large company, worldwide company based out of Boston. And he called me and said, could you come to my office and talk about how you might be able to help me? I went up there and he said, I'm a perfectly good speaker for the president of a company, but not a good enough speaker for the CEO of a company. And within 5 years, I plan on being the CEO of this company or another company, and I have to be a better presenter. And I said, Mark, with maybe showing that I'm a little ignorant in my own industry, what do you see as the difference? Because I don't see any difference. And he said, well, I see the president of a company speaking internally most of the time, and I'm perfectly good at that. But as a CEO, you're asked to speak at the Chamber of Commerce. You're asked to speak at the university. You're asked to speak in all these different places. You might be live on media. And he said, I'm not good with that. At the end, what he said to me when we were all done, and he became and is a tremendous speaker, he said to me, I hired you to teach me public speaking skills. I said, yes. And he said, you did that. But what I got most out of it is I achieved a level of confidence at 55 years old that I never thought I could achieve.
Nice.
And here's a very accomplished man. And he just got that confidence that he didn't know he could get. When I see that light bulb goes off, not of an idea, but the light bulb that signifies that they have a newfound confidence, that's when I'm almost willing to give them their money back and say, I'm happy to do this for free. Almost willing to do that. But I absolutely love that. And for the people younger than me, that confidence will be with them throughout their lives, and they'll accomplish things that I won't live to see. But I do know that I had something to do, a little help with them achieving what they want to achieve in life, which might help their family, which might help others, which might help the world. Who knows? And I just had this little piece of helping them do that.
Brilliant. And I know that you've you've had a lot of kind of Fortune 100 companies. People aspire to get that. Is it just slogging and they come? Any tips and tricks for those that are trying to get land the Fortune 100 or even 500?
I wish I could say I did that strategically. The first Fortune 100 company I ever worked with, someone that I know through networking locally, called me and said, my nephew is in this particular company. His presentation skills aren't what they need to be. I told him there's no one else to go to but you. I went down to New York City, down to Manhattan. We worked together. I was down there a dozen times over a few months, and we worked together. And then I started working with that company in groups for their executives, which then got me referrals into other companies. Brilliant. So it was happenstance. I'd love to say, here's how I can teach you to get into Fortune 500 or Fortune 100 companies.
But I mean, like the reality is, you build up your skill set. You were teaching somebody, someone realized you had that skill set. And because of the hours you had put in building your, what you're doing, it just led to that. So sometimes people, they don't put in the work and they just expect it to land on their lap, and it's a hard slog. But I think
it really is. And I think the more you work, this is the old saying goes, the more you work, the luckier you get.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I think that was just what it is.
And I know, like, are you working on a book, or have you finished a book?
I'm working on a book, and it's funny because I've had this book in my head for years, and I used to be a publisher. I owned a publishing company for 15 years, and I sold it in 2005. And I've had this book about public speaking in my head. I know exactly how to lay it out. I wanted it laid out. I know exactly what I wanted to cover, how I wanted to do that, the tone of it, everything. And I wouldn't write it. And then one day I was speaking to Bob Berg. Are you familiar with Bob Berg from the Go Giver?
No.
Go Giver series of business books, or bestsellers. And he was actually the first person I ever had on as a podcast, but I had known Bob prior to that. And we were talking about it. And he said, just write the book. Why won't you write the book? And I said, Bob, I don't know, but I promise you I'll start. And I did. And the funny thing was, after about 2 months, I said, now I know why I didn't want to write the book. Having been a former publisher, I know what goes into writing a book. And it's like, this is a ton of work, but it's coming along. And my goal is to have it out by October 31st. The working title is It's All About the Audience. I don't know if that'll be the final title or not, but it's all about the audience and how a small shift in focus can make a world of difference. Because I think too many of us, including well-paid presenters and speakers, focus on us, what we're doing as opposed to what the audience is getting. And if we make everything about the audience, which it should be, then you're that much better off. You become a much better presenter and speaker. I mentioned this on a lot of my own podcasts. I think it's metaphorically, we should do just the opposite than what we do. When you get up on stage, they put the speaker in the light and the audience in the dark. Metaphorically, it should be the other way around, or at least everyone in the light. You're there to enlighten the audience. Why put them in the dark? As a matter of fact, when I speak, I make sure that the house lights don't go down. I'm not a cinema screen. There's no reason for that audience to sit there in the dark. I don't need any more help to put them asleep.
That's interesting, actually. I've never heard of that one.
It's funny when talking about putting to sleep. A couple of years ago, I was doing a presentation, and I was in the back of the room, and I wanted to get some hot tea about an hour before going up. And I go over where they have all the coffee and tea, water set up, and the only tea they had was sleepy time tea. Only tea. And I'm thinking, why would a hotel be putting out for a function sleepy time tea? So I hate to admit this, but I scooped them all up. Like, I'm not letting them give my audience stuff that is going to put them to sleep. God forbid I'm giving my audience stuff is going to put them to sleep. I didn't want any help. So yeah, I still have a photo of the box that had the tea. No caffeinated tea, no regular decaffeinated tea, just that. I'm like, really?
So I think that was a good move on your behalf. And it's interesting you said about the lighting, because when it's dark, you'll always get, especially if it's a bigger, you'll always get a percentage that are not engaged. And our phones are a huge distraction, because when you have darkness, you have a big glare on your face, and it is not like, whether it's like in the cinema, you just want to clatter the fella in front of you because you can't concentrate on the screens. That's kind of similar if you're, especially if you want to really, listen and take notes and everything. And plus, the other thing is, it's harder writing notes when it's really dark, because sometimes they really dim the light. So I think that's
I've seen times when it's almost pitch black, and then they have extra lights on the stage. I'm like, wow, what are you trying to accomplish here? We're not shining lights on the Rolling Stones. This, get the audience lit and let the conversation happen. You can't have a conversation to someone in the darkness. not a real good conversation anyway. So that's one of the things I suggest to my clients that they ask for if they're speaking up on stage. And I always do. It's right in my agreement that the audience will not sit in darkness. And let's face it, we can be as professional as we believe we are. And when we're up on stage, and like you said, if they're in dark and that glow is shining up on their face from their phone, we are going to look back at them again and again. It's kind of like when you have a sore tooth and you go, oh, yep, still sore. You know, we'll look around and go, oh, he's still on the phone. Oh, he's still on the phone. And it's just there. We look at the brightest thing. You know, we look at shiny objects. It's true as well as metaphorical. So we look at that bright, shiny object again and again. And once we start concentrating on that, we start to lose a little bit of maybe our inflection, our pace, our pausing, whatever it is. Everything starts to flatten out a little bit.
The other thing is sometimes they have such big lights, you feel like a dazzled rabbit on the stage and you cannot see. It's just dark, you know, no matter what way the lighting. So this way you can actually see how they're engaging with you and you can change. Because I mean, if you know they don't seem to be getting this, you can, you know, modify. I mean, some people, they have everything rehearsed to a T and they can't do that. But, you know, when you're able to adjust and you say, it doesn't look like they're kind of getting this, the fact that you can see them gives you a huge advantage.
You're right, Roy. That's one of the things I look for is what my audience is doing. Are they nodding their heads? Are they smiling? If they all look like the dog who doesn't understand what their master's saying with the cocked head a little bit, well, then I probably lost them somewhere. I just said something that I screwed up. I left a word out. I said it wrong, whatever it was. I didn't put an R on it and they don't understand it, whatever it might be. And you get that feedback. And that's why when I work with people, I say, no, embrace the fact that you're making eye contact. Don't be afraid to. That gives you that feedback. And granted, they have to work into getting used to that. But once you get that feedback, even things like when people say, well, if they cross their arms, they're not engaged. Well, either that might also be cold in the room. So if I'm on stage and I see a number of people with their arms crossed, the first thing I do is, while I'm speaking, is think, is it cold in here? And if it is, I say to myself, well, that's why their arms are crossed, and move on. And if it's pretty warm in there and everybody has their arms crossed, I'm like, okay, I lost them somewhere along the line and I have to.
There's something actually on that, because lots of people would say you're not open to receiving information with your arms crossed. I used to do that a lot. We were made to do that in school. So we started school at 4. And I mean, obviously you wouldn't be doing it in secondary school, but for the first few years, it's probably conditioned in a lot of people. And, you know, that's their way of learning. So, you know, because sometimes we've been told, oh, someone has their arms crossed, they're not receiving the information and everything, because that's something else that people is pushing. So I believe that, you know, I would never take the arm crossing as something, because I don't know, is it the same in America, but in Ireland?
Same thing.
Yeah.
Same thing. And, you know, you don't know why people necessarily do things like cross their arms. They might be an introvert. I'm an introvert. I know sometimes if I'm uncomfortable in a crowd, I don't normally cross my arms in an everyday situation, but I have found sometimes that when I'm sitting in a crowd that all of a sudden my arms are crossed. I'm just uncomfortable being in this huge crowd. And maybe it's protecting myself. Maybe it's trying to get smaller altogether. I don't know what it is, but it's not necessarily that they're not engaged. It could be they're just not comfortable where they are. So it's not our fault as a speaker. It's just the situation they're in.
Yeah. No, and it's the same with me. I've done that, and you know, there's other times then where you just embrace it and everything. Yeah. So
exactly.
Listen, Peter, it's been fantastic, and I know that from the free ebook that you've got, there's some brilliant points in it, which in turn means like your book was going to give some great value. So I look forward to when it comes out in October. But how can people get in contact with you so that they'll, you know, stay in contact with you?
Easiest way is the website. It's pretty literal, petergeorgepublicspeaking.com. They can learn about the podcast, download the 50 plus free public speaking tips and the like. Go right there.
Brilliant. I put all the links in the description. Thank you very much.
It's been a pleasure. A lot of fun.
So that's all for the Speaking Podcast. You can find all our episodes on speakingpodcast.com. Be sure to give us a thumbs up, share with your friends. Until next week, take care.